Okay.
Hey, what's up, guys? How you doing? Welcome to Straight Talk Podcast with Professor Red Pill and Adam Maxwell from Liberty Rising. We're going to give you a nice show today.
Look forward to it. Lots of events, lots of developments.
Yeah, definitely. We haven't had a podcast for about a week, maybe 2 weeks, maybe about a week and a half, maybe. But a lot has changed. Basically, as I predicted. The war in Ukraine is over finally. Let me actually bring up my prediction here. I posted this on the locals channel. This was posted on January 31st of 2023. So this was roughly 2 years ago. I did mention this before in a previous podcast, and that was re-uploaded on the YouTube channel for those following us on YouTube. Basically, war versus recession. By summer, the U.S. consumer will be tapped out financially, i.e., the average American will be demanding the end of the conflict to focus on the U.S. economy. This is the main reason I am predicting a ceasefire and peace deal coming by the end of summer. And 2 years, like COVID, it will be as if the conflict never happened, i.e. the U.S. will start lifting sanctions soon after a peace deal. Zelensky, however, will not be as fortunate as the conflict and economic poverty after the conflict in Ukraine will be solely placed on him. Welcome to the clown world. So I wrote this 2 years ago. I was predicting that we were going to hit a recession. It said it's posted at 223, but I swear it was posted last year, but it's fine. Eventually, like what I predicted would happen exactly is what happening now, right? More or less, that basically Trump took power. He threw Zelensky under the bus, and now he even referred to him as a dictator. Did he not?
Yes.
I mean, that was more or less like what I was predicting would happen. It's as if Trump administration's following the podcast or the Telegram channel.
Or that the podcast is describing reality as it is, independent of regime narratives. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's probably more likely is the fact that being that I'm a professor of sociology and leadership studies, and you're an economist, and we have some very intelligent people in our Telegram group and that come on the podcast regularly, regular contributors. So we've made predictions. However, the timeline on this one was a little off. I was predicting that the war would end probably 2024 by summer, but hey, it's going to end summer of 2025. That's what I've been told by birdies in the field and people that I know that know. And I was basically 2 years off. But I predicted it nonetheless, more or less.
Well, the past 2 years, my reading of the war zone is that Ukraine's lost the war, but there's been a lot of fighting to go. It seemed that there was no way in which they were capable of winning the war, and they've just been losing and losing and losing. It's like in World War II. The war was over long before the Red Army reached Berlin, but the war finished only when they reached Berlin and had the peace deal. So this war, the past 2 years, most everyone in the alternative media sphere whom are disconnected from system narratives have been saying that this war is over, Ukraine has lost, but there's still a lot of fighting to go. And there's been predictions, maybe summer of 2024 was kind of what I had many 2023 they said by the end of the summer, before winter didn't happen, 2024, and now one can say, well, it didn't happen, let's double down this year, this summer, definitely now. But I think that that's not the case, that the American support for the war has dropped. The Ukrainian morale has fallen off a cliff, is my understanding. The casualty figures, no one knows for sure, but my estimates are mind-blowing how many people have died, especially disproportionately Ukrainians. So it seems that the war actually is now coming to the close. Again, end of summer, max, early autumn, and of course it could keep going. But with the collapse of US support, the inability for European support, the geopolitical developments going on, it seems as though the war is over. It's closing down. How much longer will the fighting continue? And let's be clear, there is still significant fighting on the front lines. People are dying every day. Bloody artillery, UAVs, drones. The conflict is still going, but the strategic war seems to be coming to the close.
Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah. And I was just saying, like, basically, it takes time for these wars, like I said, to finally come to conclusion. I mean, it's been going on, what, 3 years now? Is it 4? It was shortly, basically, to end at COVID. Yeah, 3 years. So it may take at least 6 months for them to kind of wrap it up. You know what I mean? And not really wrap it up, but
it could take a year. 1 month. It could take a month. It could take a year. It depends. I think ultimately, it depends. It's like right now there's bilateral talks going on between the United States of America and Russia. Bilateral meaning Ukraine's not involved, neither are the Europeans. Now, the Europeans and the Ukrainians, they can also initiate bilateral talks with Russia. They're not doing so, and they're complaining we're being left out. But of course, the ironic or the just absurd thing is, when the Western side was having their peace talks and peace summits, there was no invitation to the Russians, which made them completely futile. Right. So now they're complaining, there was a meeting in Riyadh between the Americans and the Russians, to which my understanding
that I predicted.
Is very little. Very little
I said exactly,
about Ukraine was actually mentioned. It was just bilateral agreements. Like they've reopened embassies. Go on.
Yeah, I was just saying, like, I exactly predicted exactly what happened. I said that the peace deal would happen in the Middle East. It'd be Turkey or Saudi Arabia, because it's an oil war. It's an energy war. It's the last of energy wars other than the Gaza Strip. But basically, it would have to become through a neutral party, probably in not the Caucasus, but literally Saudi Arabia or Turkey. Turkey is too. The best way to describe it
in the lines. They tried Turkey. This was the Istanbul Accords in March, April 2022. And for example, Turkey was as the location given for some of the captured prisoners of wars to be sent to. And what did Turkey do? They said, "You're welcome back into Europe." The prisoner of wars went back to Ukraine, and some of them ended back on the front lines. And Russia just went, that's such a not neutral move. Just keep them in Turkey until the war's over. Don't let them back in Ukraine. They couldn't do that. So yeah, there's Turkey as a NATO member. This is a conflict between Russia and NATO, with Ukraine as a proxy. Turkey is not a neutral jurisdiction. The Middle East is, and Riyadh, great location.
Correct. Yeah, I said it would happen in Turkey. It did happen in Turkey. Then I said that it would eventually happen in the Middle East, probably in Saudi Arabia. That's exactly what happened. What happened. But the thing is like I had said, as I wrote in the article, what would eventually happen is that basically your NATO countries, predominantly European NATO countries, and Ukraine, Zelensky definitely would be left out of any peace deals. And when that happens, that's the end of the conflict. There is no more negotiations. There's no more concessions. Literally, it's going to be drawn out, and it's going to be, this is going to happen. This is the concessions. This is what's going to happen. This is the future. They're going to divide up the country. Like I said at the beginning of the conflict 3 years ago, that basically you would see Eastern Ukraine and Western Ukraine. There would be a DMZ probably through the deep. Can you pronounce that word properly for me? Dnipro River? I can't pronounce it. I'm sorry. Oh, you're muted. Sorry. Yeah, it's all good.
Dnipro.
Yeah. So that would be basically geographically, because usually when they do these, like with I said it was going to be basically like the Korean War. They would split the country in half, and you would have Eastern Ukraine and Western Ukraine. And Western Ukraine would go under the jurisdiction of the EU and NATO, but they wouldn't station NATO troops there. What I think is going to end up happening is they're going to bring UN peacekeeping troops. They're going to let the UN deal with it. So the UN troops will stay on the west side. Russia actually has their own peacekeeping troops. I don't know if you're aware of that, Adam. They have
them they use it in the CIS, the Commonwealth with International Soviet States, haven't they?
Yeah, and they were in Syria
in Nagorno-Karabakh, Syria.
Yeah, Karabakh. Yeah. So more than likely, Russia will send these peacekeeping troops in Eastern Ukraine, and there will be no more NATO. It'll be UN peacekeeping troops in Western Ukraine. And I'm not sure if they're going to keep the capital in Kiev or if they're going to move it to Lviv. That I'm not sure about. I don't know what you think.
I disagree with you. I think the Russians aren't interested in a frozen conflict. They've won this war. They can keep going. They've imposed their will.
Oh, no, they need. I'm talking about this isn't a permanent. This is like temporary. This is just so that they can get the fight and die down.
I think the Russians have said, we're not interested in a pause. This is the Minsk Accords were. And the West said, ha, suckers. They said, we're not trusting you anymore. We're not looking like we're winning this war. We've won this war. We've defeated the military. We can keep going. Our armies on, the Russian military is going. We're winning. Like, we can keep going forever. Not forever, we can keep going till the border of Ukraine. We're winning this war. We don't want to. We'd rather, they've said throughout consistently, the dialogue is on the table. We're open to negotiations. So, but I think they say we're not looking for a pause in the conflict. We're looking to end the conflict, a permanent solution, which, and you go back to December 2022, so it's a couple months before the war initiated. Russia put forward 2 security proposals to the Americans and Europeans and said the way the European security architecture is not working right now. It needs to be redone. Here's our proposals. And they were told no, just non-starter was the response from the Biden administration. Macron, 3 days before the initiation of the war, or I think it was the 20th of February, he said that the Minsk Accords were not legally binding. So, the Russians said, okay, well, we've tried diplomacy for many years. Every single agent of the West had said that the Minsk Accords were a fraud. They were never intended to be implemented. And they say, well, okay, we've tried diplomacy. Now it's military means or politics by other means. I don't think the Russians have any interest in freezing the conflict. A freeze is the same thing that happened in Syria. They froze the conflict. Aleppo belongs to the jihadis. We've got most of Syria. And then it allows the West to build up and be subversive and say, okay, we've got 5 years. Let's go at it again. Well, in 5 years' time, the military, it's wound down. People are back home. Another war. Right now, Russia says, we have to get this job done, and they're getting it done. The men are on the lines. It's a horrible thing, but it's being done. So I don't think it's in their interest to freeze. And this is not just my belief. This is what, for example, Sergei Lavrov has said repeatedly. We're not interested in a pause and a freeze. We need to resolve this permanently. So I do think, you mentioned Western Ukraine and Eastern Ukraine. Are you talking about Eastern Ukraine, the 4 territories which have been formally annexed into the Russian Federation? That's now Russia.
Yes.
That's not Eastern Ukraine.
No. Russia. Eastern Ukraine outside of Donbass. So Donbass is part of Russian
not
Federation.
Donbass. It's 4. So Donbass, which is Lugansk and Donetsk. They
right.
also have
Crimea.
Kherson and Dnipropetrovsk, and Crimea, which was absorbed in 2014. So those 5 oblasts out of, I think, 22 or 24 original of Ukraine, 1991 borders, those aren't Eastern Ukraine now. Those are Russia proper, the motherland.
Yeah, of course.
So Russia, they've got the choice. Do they want to keep the war going until they reach the east bank of the Dnieper River, which is also called the left bank because it goes from north to south? Or do they do peace? Like, what happens to the rest of Ukraine? Do they want to absorb more territories? I
think that's going to happen. That's what I'm trying to say. I think that Eastern Ukraine will be Eastern Ukraine, but it'll be what's known as an autonomous region. That's what I said would happen in the beginning of conflict, is basically west of those regions that you're referring to, Crimea, Donbass, and Lugansk, and all of this. Basically, any territory, and the thing is most of that territory is it's the resource-rich territory of Ukraine. Most of the farmland, the agriculture, most of the resources, as far as LNG, minerals, they're all in that part of it, east of Kiev.
I think
that's where.
Yeah, I think most of Ukraine, west of Kiev, I think it's phenomenal farmland.
No, west and east, but like west of Donbass is exactly. It's like Kansas. The territory is like Kansas, basically.
But apparently,
similar
even better,
terrain.
The best.
Oh yeah. It's very fertile
in the world. Black soil.
So the reason why I'm saying this is it's not so much of a geopolitical thing; it's an economic thing. Because you have to understand that the only country that would be able to get Ukraine back in order is going to be Russia, because they're going to, they have to get that farmland back, and they have to clean everything up. They got to get the farmland back to work in production. And because you understand, a lot of the wheat and a lot of the grain and different things that was coming from Ukraine was going to Africa and a lot of these developing economies. That's why we're dealing with the economic crisis we are right now, is because now we're relying on Russia sanctions on Russia. So now they're relying on the United States, and Europe's going through economic turmoil because of they self what's the word I like using? They self-sanction themselves, or they sanction themselves basically by sanctioning Russia.
Self-inflicted sanctions.
That's it, yeah. So basically, that they're a deficit with agriculture. It really comes down, because I'm an agriculturalist. I've worked in agriculture for a year through the summer, and I know a little bit about agriculture and how it works. And the reality is that land, there's no way they're going to be able to stabilize Ukraine fast enough to get a harvest, because if they get it done by summer, which I think what I'm being told is what the timeline is. They need to get that agricultural land ready for harvesting, because we're going to see a food crisis, like I said before. They could, but like I said, anyone that could do it is going to be Russia. Russia's the only country that's going to be able to do it.
The other problem is you can get the land, but like if all the Ukrainian men are out of the country, or
you bring in contractors, you bring in people from other countries to come in
to do the farm work.
Why not? Bring in Filipinos, bring in Chinese, bring whoever, you know what I mean, and try to rebuild as quickly as possible. If anybody can do it, it's Russia. I know that. You saw Crimea after the Crimean War, how quickly they rebuilt Crimea.
But there was no destruction. Like for example, if there's unexploded ordnance,
that's the main thing, is cleaning it up.
They blow up
and getting it done, and Russia's the only one that would be able to do it, because they know the terrain. They have the personnel there. They have the infrastructure. They're right. There's no way they don't have to ship stuff in. They can just truck stuff right in and start rebuilding and get the stuff irrigated and ready to go. Maybe it might take a year. Maybe it might take 2 years. I don't know. But the reality is that this area would become an autonomous zone. It would be part of Ukraine, but yet it would still be autonomous, kind of like Abkhazia, Ossetia, and Georgia, which we'll get to that topic in a minute. But that's what I think it's going to end up is. You're going to have Eastern Ukraine autonomous zone. It will be part of Ukraine, but it will be autonomous because they need a buffer zone between Russia and NATO.
So
and
this
EU.
is forecasting. So either of us
forecasting. It's probably prediction. Could be totally different. I'm just what I'm thinking. Just knowing, I've been in Ukraine. I've lived in Ukraine. I'm a geopolitical analyst, and I'm an expert in the Black Sea region. Have a lot of contacts, geopolitically and in academia with this. So, as far as Western Ukraine is concerned, I think Western Ukraine will be basically Ukraine. It will be no autonomous zone, but the EU will have to come in. I think the UN will come in and send peace troops, and not necessarily peacekeeping troops, but just like a UN. They call it. It's called the EUMM. You could look it up. I don't know if you're familiar with it. The European Union has a manned mission. It's a member mission. I forget the name. It's called, the acronym is EUMM, if you want to look it up. They'll send these
monitoring mission, an unarmed peacekeeping
go.
mission operated by the European Union in Georgia, conceived in September 2008.
They'll have something similar in Western Ukraine, most likely. And Russia will be monitoring the autonomous zone of Eastern Ukraine. And then there will be a transition back to Ukraine eventually, or Russia will just say, fuck it, it's autonomous, it's ours. Like what happened in Ossetia and Abkhazia, basically.
So
That's what I think is going to happen.
I think that I think that Western Ukraine, they're not going to give up any of Western Ukraine to the West.
Oh, not at all.
Why,
not at all.
Why should they? I don't think that Vinnytsia is going to go to Romania. I don't think Volin.
Oh, no,
Poland.
That's what Gonzalo Lira had said, and a bunch of people, and that's bullshit. No, it'll be it'll be Ukraine.
And then I think the Ukrainian government, so the original constitution of Ukraine mandated a degree of neutrality and especially respect for Russian language, culture, beliefs, no cultural persecution. This Kiev regime, since the 2014 coup especially, was completely in violation of these. So I think we'll have a smaller Ukraine. There's a term, the rump state of Ukraine, but that's really if another 4 oblasts go, which is Sumy, Poltava, Kirovohrad, Mykolaiv, and Odessa. If those are annexed, then the rest of Ukraine is a rump state that has no access to the Black Sea, and that's kind of a really bad situation. So they've still got the entirety of this whole country. If they can maintain as much of that as possible, great. I think the Russians will come in and insist on a degree of vassalage. It's going to be independent. So this is my predictions. It's going to be independent in terms of neutrality. They constitutionally cannot align with the West. They cannot join the EU. They cannot join NATO. They cannot allow Western troops there. Maybe UN troops. I'm sure that's possible, but not Western troops. And likewise, I don't believe that Russia will. I don't think there'll be a full military occupation. There could be. It depends how the peace process goes. But hopefully there's a degree of acceptance, and there's not this requirement for a Russian occupation army. Maybe a peacekeeping army, however, which one can say is the same thing. So I think that there's going to be a new government, i.e., denazification. And if you look at the fall of Germany in the 1940s, the Americans came in and occupied Germany, and they still have hundreds of thousands of troops there.
That's what it'll probably be similar to. That's what I was saying.
And this process of denazification lasted decades, arguably still to this day, but certainly there was like this 30-year period of intensive denazification. That's what I think will occur in Ukraine.
Exactly. That's what I was saying before as well. Like that's what it seems like it'd be more of. Not like in North and South Korea. It'll literally be like Eastern Western Berlin, like I had said before, like 3 years ago. You're exactly it, like exactly how you pointed it out. But I still think there's going to be like an EU member management. I think EU is still going to try to come in. There won't be NATO. There won't be NATO troops. There won't be US troops there. But it will be, if anything, UN troops just to keep peace, because we don't know. The main thing, it's not so much Russia for the UN troops. It has nothing to do with Russia. Why I'm saying this. It has to do with the rebels inside of Ukraine. Because when they realize the war is over and they lost all their comrades, they lost all of these, these young men in Ukraine, there's going to be a lot of pissed off people. And not only that, but there's going to be famines, there's going to be crime, there's going to be poverty, prostitution, whatever. This is what happens after wars. So the peacekeeping troops are going to be there to keep civil order. Not so much to prevent a war or to prevent further conflict. That they're going to be there for the Ukrainians to make sure that they're not deciding to do a rebellion or another color revolution. That's why I think they're going to be there. And that's why I think Russia's going to be sending peacekeeping troops on the other side to make sure that there's no rebellions or any type of like civil disorder or anything like that. But on the eastern side, it might be different because most of the Ukrainians have fled Eastern Ukraine. So
or don't mind living under the Russian Federation.
Exactly. So it'll be an autonomous zone most likely, and eventually transition into part of Russia, most likely. But that's decades. You know what I mean? Like you're talking about. This could be 10, 20, 30 years. Ukraine's going to be a shithole country for many, many years. The failed state. They're bankrupt. They're living on the U.S. dime. Trump is like, hey, I'm cutting U.S. aid. I'm cutting aid to these countries, even Georgia, which we'll get to in a minute.
First off, Trump said, I want 50% of your natural resources.
Oh, yeah.
Which is worse than the Treaty of Versailles. And it is like for example, the British in Iran in the beginning of the 20th century, they said, we want 50% of all your oil resources. And they said, sure, so long as you develop it and do everything. And then there was resentment, like, well, why are we giving the British 50% of all our natural resources and wealth? And then there was a revolution. They said, no. Nationalization and whatnot. So yeah, I think and what Trump said is right. He said, well, we've spent like way more than Europe. We're not getting anything back. This is a very bad deal. And you know what? We're losing. The Ukraine is losing. There's no way to win this. So he's managing the escalation and the end of the conflict because there's no way to win.
Yep. I think Trump already made a negotiation and peace deal before he even took office. That's my honest opinion. I said that before this happened, and I think it was already negotiated preemptively before. But I'm not going to say that. I'm not, I'm just not a conspiracy or anything like that. But I think he had a good idea of what he was going to do, and I'm sure Putin as well. And not saying that they talked to each other or anything like that, but they kind of knew what was going to happen.
You go in with a plan, but you don't talk. I'd just like to say I've got a map now of Ukraine, the 24 oblasts. Was saying.
You want to bring it up? You want to send it to me?
I'll send it to you. Yeah, I posted it in the private chat. I was saying Dnipropetrovsk before. That actually is still part of Ukraine proper right now. I meant Zaporozhye. So Lugansk, Donetsk, Zaporozhye, Kherson. And then the next 4 oblasts, which are a lot of Russian speaking. If you scroll down, there's a better map, I think.
Oh, okay.
The one just below that, I prefer. It's a higher quality. Yeah, that one. So then you've got Kharkiv, Dnipropetrovsk, Mykolaiv, and Odessa. These are like Kharkiv, Odessa are major regions. That's what oblast means. Are major to Ukraine. Mykolaiv, Dnipropetrovsk as well. There's a lot of industry, a lot of things going on there. And that you've got the Dnieper River, and then you've got the Black Sea. These are the economic lifelines of this country. If those are conceded, territorial concessions to Russia, then the rest of Ukraine, this landlocked rump state, would be devastating. So Trump said, look, they've lost those 4, Crimea as well, but the 4 most eastern borders, those are all Russia now. So that's out of the equation. There's another 4. And then you've not just got the 4, you've got Kharkiv and Sumy on the east side of the Dnieper River, which actually goes through Kiev, all the way down to Mykolaiv and Kherson, but it kind of snakes all the way around through Dnipropetrovsk. And so there's still a lot of Ukraine that's on that side of the river.
Yeah, kind of like that a little bit.
It actually goes further around Kherson, Dnipropetrovsk. It goes even, like the border of the Dnipropetrovsk and Kherson is still the river. So even further... further to the east. Anyway, so it's
it is what it is, man. As I always say, it is what it is. We predicted it. We called it. The timeline was a little off by about a year and a half, maybe 2 years. But exactly as we played it out, and we war gamed it. I can't believe how accurately I called everything, and how accurately we called everything, and then also our our sister channels or related channels that we follow and that we correspond with, they called it too. I mean, it is what it is. Even all these influencers that came on, with Gonzalo and all that, they had no clue. They had no clue. Brian Pathetic or any of these people were saying all this different stuff. I don't mean to throw influencers on the bus, but I think we got the most accurate prediction of what happened. Unbelievably accurate. I mean, that's why you guys should subscribe. You should join Locals. You should join Adam Maxwell's Liberty Rising group. And you have Locals right now, Adam? Or are you still waiting?
I do. I have Locals. I need to start adding the links. But yeah, I'm on Locals. Do go follow me there. I'll have the link in.
Yeah, support our content, like I said, because we we know what we're talking about. I mean, we have I'm a professor, and we have academics that are in here and people that know what's going on, and it is what it is. But yeah, like it's definitely a war that's over. Russia has won the war officially, and Trump is like, dude, this guy Zelensky was not my guy, and he's out. And he's like he was a decent guy when I met him, is what he said. And but I mean, at this point, he's just being nice. But like, yeah, the guy's a dictator, man. I mean, we're two. Aren't we 2 years?
He's always been a piece of shit. Like he was installed by the MI6. Like there's this documentary called Agent Zelensky, which showcases the MI6 psychological operation that was Zelensky and his show Servant of the People. This wasn't this was
predictive programming.
Out.
Yeah, we have a couple of podcasts we did on predictive programming, propaganda, if you will, by the war machine, the military industrial complex, and the propagandists in the deep state. But yeah, it is what it is. I mean, I can't sugarcoat it any more than it is. I mean, pretty much what Trump said, it was like it. He's kind of like that guy, just rips the Band-Aid right off, doesn't give a fuck. He's like, dude, rip it off. He says what's got to be said,
I think it would be a mistake for him to try and own the war, and therefore it is beneficial for him to say, this isn't my war. This was Biden's war. He said, this would have never happened under me. I never supported this war. This is not my war. This is not my failure, the Donald Trump administration. And this is what J.D. Vance has said. I made a comment. I made a comment in my Telegram chat. J.D. Vance is presenting a rational policy position. Wow, incredible. Is this the first time this century that Washington has come to a realistic determination? So it's for Trump to come in and say this is, and JD, his administration, to say the war's over. Let's ignore the moralistic garbage. There's two simple arguments. For 3 years, President Trump and I have made two simple arguments. The war wouldn't have started if Trump was in office, and there's no pathway to victory. This was true 3 years ago. It's true 2 years ago. It's true last year. It's true today. So Trump is dealing with reality, which means dealing with facts. And, dealing with facts, here's how you have to, here's the best way to manage it. There's no good deal, right, for Ukraine. They've lost the war. So let's try and get the best deal that Ukraine is capable of realizing. And that I think is what the challenge for Trump.
I mean, the thing is too, is like I said, we definitely called it. But yeah, I mean, it is what it is. I think the main thing is, like I had said, that it's the economy, stupid, basically. The economy, the global economy is in very, 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 very critical condition. And you can feel it here in Tbilisi, where I'm at right now. You could obviously feel it in Bulgaria, where you're at. You definitely feel it in Germany. And the United States is kind of the last to really feel it. But China right now is a really bad situation. I don't know what it's like in Russia. But from what I hear from Russians here, they said it's starting to get pretty bad because of the sanctions both ways, Europe and Russia. Not so much in Russia because they're self-sustainable. They produce a lot of their own, food and all that stuff. Main thing is that they can't sell the LNG to America and to Europe, and that's obviously taken a toll. But that's going to be ending. Like I said, Trump wants to get that LNG back into Europe. He wants to get Europe back and running again. And they're the dumb people that they are, in this unelected European Commission, the in Brussels. Where is it? Brussels or Brussels. Yeah, they're unelected. They have a committee of people that are unelected, and they're the bureaucrats that are making all these decisions.
You mentioned LNG back into Europe, but what do you mean by that? Because LNG is not the pipeline gas, which is pipeline gas.
No, not necessarily LNG, but just the gas pipeline, the Nord Stream, trying to get that back online. Germany is the one that's probably main ones that are probably spearheading this peace deal. And but we don't know that. Like I said, we're not in the circle. So
Schultz.
They have the most benefit. Germany has the most benefit by a peace deal.
Don't they have an election like next week?
I'm sure they do, and I'm sure it's going to be very critical. And this is going to be one of the main topics or one of the main issues that will be
Apparently,
part of
it's
that
tomorrow.
election. Oh, tomorrow. Okay. Well, maybe we might do a short. I might do a short news segment tomorrow to cover the election and what happened. But yeah, I mean, it's Europe has nothing. They have nothing to lose by a peace deal. They have only to gain because they're pouring money into this Ukraine, and not only that, but like I said, Russia's gonna have to. Everybody's gonna have to take responsibility to try to clean this up. It's not so much about the war itself; it's just the cleanup afterwards. The country's been devastated, and it's going to take a lot to rebuild. However, at the same time, from what I heard from similar people that were telling me that the timeline is that it'll be over by summer, is that BlackRock, will be has invested a lot of money, and apparently there's already words and about contracts being bid right now. Birdies are telling me to get rebuilding contracts on Russia and in Europe and America's side. So,
and so this is what the negotiations are about. Like, does
right.
Russia have any? Like, what's the leverage Russia has? Well, if they're imposing their will on Ukraine, it's like, well, how much do they wish to concede? The Americans and the Europeans having that leverage, because when Condoleezza Rice and BlackRock come in, it's not just like investment, right? It's ownership, it's stake, it's property. They're coming to colonize the nation that they've destroyed.
Yeah, they call it nation building, but really what it is just we're rebuilding shit we blew up. That's all it is.
So it's all a big grift. The money's gone from Americans to the military-industrial complex, which the shareholders are the ones that run the things, and that's gone to both in Ukraine, and now they're gonna. So I
think BlackRock's probably the new Halliburton. Basically, is what it seems like.
Yes, it's like I've heard people say like, oh, America doesn't have a sovereign wealth fund. So what do you think BlackRock is? Like, you think it's a private entity? No, it's a corporation. It's the U.S. government. No, it's a profit organization. Right, it's an asset manager. And NGO means specifically that the money that's in the organization can't be withdrew through dividend to shareholders. That's all an NGO means. And they're supposed to not have profit as their main mission. So BlackRock, they have profit as their main mission, but because they're also the U.S. government, they say, well, we have other ideological reasoning, and this is, they're not a hedge fund; they're an asset manager, which means that they can impose DEI or what's the economic one that they say, like global governance, so these kind of things.
Okay.
So
the 1984 type talk. Yeah, I mean, for the most part,
ESG, economic social governance.
That's it. I mean, for the most part, we're going to definitely see a lot of contracts going through, and I think a lot of the investment that was here in Georgia, for instance, we're going to get to that in a minute. From what I understand, is going to be flowing into Ukraine, so it's going to affect a lot of the developing economies surrounding the Ukraine area, predominantly the Caucasus and Eastern Europe, where you're at right now in Bulgaria. A lot of the contracts for any type of investment or building is going to be going directly to Ukraine. That's where the contractors are going to go. So you're going to see probably a lot of people leaving these countries to go work in Ukraine to rebuild and for jobs. Definitely going to see that. That's why I said you're going to see they're going to be bringing people from all over Europe to go work in Ukraine.
Great opportunity. I mean, things are going to be cheap. Yeah. You want to get land. You can't get land in main Europe. Go to Ukraine. I hope
that's what I was waiting for. That's what I was telling you. That's what I was waiting for.
There's retribution for people whose homes have been completely destroyed. I have no idea, but certainly, if there's call it 1 million people have died. I don't know. Don't quote me on that.
I think Trump said it was probably. He said it was probably 1 million just civilians alone. Possibly. No, I think it might have been. I think it was redacted that said that. He said it's probably 1 million just civilians alone.
I think
displaced or murdered or killed or whatever.
Displaced millions. 8 figures, millions.
I predicted at the beginning of it.
Killed very, very low. I think less died in less civilians have died in Ukraine than Gaza.
Well, you also have to include civilians as in people that were forced out of their homes in conscription on the Ukrainian side. So they're technically casualties.
They're casualties and they're...
Oh, did I say that? They were killed by the government. My bad. Yeah, those are civilian casualties. But it's only on the Ukrainian side. But yeah, I mean, definitely. At the beginning of the conflict, I was estimating that there would be probably 7 to 10 million people displaced, refugeed out, either displaced within Ukraine or displaced as refugees outside of Ukraine. And I think that number's pretty close currently. I didn't know it was going to go on for 3 years. I thought it was going to go on for at least a year and then fizzle out. But War Machine just pumping, man. Biden was like, dude, let's make some money, man. Let's make some money, kind of thing. And then I don't think anybody made any money. So, but yeah, I think we came to an estimated number of casualties, like as far as military casualties, 2 million, give or take, because we want to quit.
And max 500,000 Russia. I think that's a massive overestimation. I think 250,000.
Yeah. We'll know in about 5-10 years, maybe 3 years when they finally release numbers. They still don't even know. It'll take many years to finally figure out the numbers, but I equivalent to the Korean conflict. How many? I think it was 3 million. Was that estimate? But they're using conventional warfare now, and the border the front lines were, I think, twice as large as the Korean War. So it could be a lot higher because like they were using smart bombs and drones and all kinds of stuff. So it could be substantially high. I heard the Ukrainian military is completely wiped out.
From the Action on Armed Violence NGO, I guess, I'm not too sure, that they say that civilian casualties from explosive violence is 32,000, which is a lot, but it's not hundreds of thousands or millions. So.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's probably not very sustainable because most of the people had probably fled. And like I said, most of the fighting was pretty much in the eastern part and the front lines near Donbass, the borders and stuff, Kherson and all that, or Kherson. I can't pronounce that word. I'm sorry. The name.
Kherson. You need to look at it in the Cyrillic. It's
the Cyrillic. It'd be easier in the Cyrillic. Yeah, I'm looking at it in Latin, and it's easier for me to read it in Russian or Ukrainian rather. But
well, it's interestingly, Kherson has been historically a Russian city, like Odessa. This is why when we went back to that map or the oblast, I talk about them being significant. So we're thinking that the economics of everything is starting to catch up, and the realism is starting to override the ideological governance that characterized the Biden administration. So in order to start on the economic recovery, you need to put an end to the war, cut back slightly on the spending, especially military. I'm not buying into the Doge narrative. They say, "Oh, we've saved this much money." Have you?
They just basically appropriate funds from one department and put it in another. That's how the government usually works.
It's like when the Democrat they propose a bill that says this bill is going to cost us $70 trillion, and then they cut back the bill and it's now only $5 trillion. They say we've saved $65 trillion in spending. You're like, well, have you? And then I hear that Trump saying, "I want to give $5,000 to every taxpayer." It's like, well, you could just cut tax, just not rob us as much, perhaps. These are just socialist handouts that they're, I
told you Trump would be the UBI president. That's what I said.
Yeah, $5,000. I mean, it's not enough to live off, but it's $500 a month almost.
Yeah.
So these are being proposed right now.
You could probably see student loan forgiveness too. I'm 100% sure that's going to some kind of student loan forgiveness is going to come. The Republicans don't like it, but if Trump does this as an executive order, there's nothing they can do because he controls the courts.
Didn't Biden try to do that, and then the Supreme Court said this is unconstitutional? Is my understanding. So then,
if Trump tries it, they'll say, "Oh yeah, rubber stamp. He's our man." I think he's going to do something. Well, the thing is there's a different method, and this chaos type situation. So see, the Democrats want to get free shit, and technically, but the Republicans give free shit. But the way Trump would probably do it is he'd probably do a jobs program, or a tax incentive. So you would say like, hey, like if if you don't make this amount of money, but then you pay taxes, like, or this, or let's say like you have a degree and you can't find a work or something like this, then we're going to give a jobs program. And if you can't qualify for the jobs program, then we're going to forgive a certain percentage. That's what I think will happen. That's kind of how the Republicans look at it. But either way, it's going to get forgiven, I think.
It's all socialist handouts, but there are better ways of doing it rather than here's some money that we've stolen your money. That money's gone, by the way. Here's some more money of plundered loot that we're going to give back to you out of the kindness of our heart so that we can buy your loyalty and your votes. And then next year, we're still going to steal more money from you. So don't worry. But, Trump gave, the Trump checks.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think there's going to be so much welfare and gimme dats, but it's going to be definitely cash. It's going to be through a tax break, or they might just do a work, like a, what is it called? Earned income credit, like Obama did during the 2008 recession, because we're going to hit a major recession here soon. I'm thinking any week or any month now. It's going to be realized. It'll be realized by the summer, definitely. By summer, we're going to realize that we're in a major economic recession, because like Korea, Japan, and China are in major depression right now economically, and they have a lot. Not so much China, but Japan and Korea have a lot of debt. They have a lot of debt. So it is what it is. I know China's not doing well, and I predicted China wouldn't do well. And it has nothing to do with the Ukrainian war. It just simply comes down to the fact that they produce everything. And right now, the European economy and the U.S. economy, which is basically the two largest economies in the world outside of China, can't buy cheap plastic goods from China. They can't buy the trinkets and all that and the electronics. So like now it's getting real for China, because like they're nobody's buying shit. We have an over surplus of goods too. That's the other thing. Warehouses full of shit.
You talk about a major recession. A recession is defined as 2 consecutive quarters of negative economic growth.
That guy redefined it, or Biden though? That guy redefined. We had 2 quarters. They said no. Yeah.
It's complete crap. But a depression is a more severe and prolonged economic downturn lasting for several years, and by a significant decline in economic activity. Yeah. I think we're I think we're already in the depression, and I think that's going to continue. And they are more characterized by high unemployment rates, a substantial drop in consumer spending and investment, and widespread business failures. Yeah. What we've seen is through fiat, just through printing, they've tried to keep things afloat, launder the money, keep it going. And I've maintained for many years that they're going to, I think from 2020 almost, they're going to keep this going until they can't. And with the war, I said, well, they're going to keep it going throughout the war, because that's like the central banks were invented in order to fund wars. And then once the war is over, once they've lost, I think that is a very, very significant potential for the trigger for the widespread losses.
That's what I'm told by insiders. People like in academia that I work with. This is what we're predicting is by summer it's going to be realized. We are in depression. We've been in depression maybe a year now, but it's just not realized. I think we were going into recession before COVID, and they used COVID as a smokescreen in order to cover it up. Not so much the Trump administration, but I think it was done at the like deep state level. Predominantly China. And I think China's going to be the biggest loser in this global recession. If you want my honest opinion, the economic global depression, I think China's going to be the biggest loser. I think Russia's going to be the biggest winner, but I think that China's going to be the biggest loser. That's what I think.
I don't know enough about China. It's just a field that's so vast and
Oh yeah. It's a huge country. It's bigger than the United States almost. Yeah, it's a huge country.
It's not something I'm an expert in, but I disagree that they're going to be the biggest losers. I think Europe has been.
Oh, Europe's going to collapse. I predicted the United States would collapse 2025, but it looks like it's going to be Europe and China. China may collapse. You may see a regime change there. You might see a uprising, a revolution, and removal of the CCP. Because, like I said, communist systems only last 60 years. They're usually the lifespan of a human lifetime, and they've revamped the country. So they were under Mao. So before Mao, they were kind of communist, but like they're the longest existing communist regime in the history of the planet. Just let you know for the background. But they were revamped into a crony capitalist, like free market communist system. So it was like it's a weird hybrid of systems. So it was a new government under Mao. And that's been going on for 60 years now. So we're kind of coming to the conclusion of Mao's new communist system.
When I
and
was
they last 60
reading,
years.
when I was reading Xi Jinping thought, and he's talking about socialism with Chinese characteristics. I mean, I was reading about it's kind of like how America is, but just with more awareness and therefore direction and therefore efficiency. Because America is already like state corporatism, socialist communism, but China, like at the very least, like I'm at the very least, they're doing it more for the goals of the country because they've got this like ideological and ethno-nationalist state government saying, look, you know, this is how it's going to work. Like, for example, Douyin TikTok, they say children, like the algorithms cannot be promoting degenerate Western content, and we're going to have child locks, and we're going to showcase engineering, and we're going to highlight Chinese efficiency, and we're going to engineer the society towards positivity. Whereas in America, it's like just profit, but it's owned by the corporate interests who lobby the US politicians, who like it's all state owned, just through different layers of hiding. So I don't think that China is ready to collapse like that. Again, it's not my.
I don't think it'll be an economic collapse. I think it's going to be regime change. It's not going to come. It may come from the Trump administration because Trump really does not like China, especially with Elon Musk at the helm. Because Elon Musk's biggest competitor is BYD, and BYD is a Chinese company, and Musk receives, I think, 60% of his Tesla vehicles are it's higher than that. I think it's closer to 80%. Are using Chinese-made batteries and their fuel cells and stuff like that, and especially his SpaceX stuff
of rare earth minerals, huge amount.
And Trump wants those. So, but it's nuclear power against nuclear power. So we'll see. They can't go. The United States can't have a direct engagement with China, just like with Russia, like with this Ukrainian conflict. But they can try to stage a coup. Like Biden tried a failed coup in Russia after the Ukrainian conflict. So after it started,
according to the US Geological Survey, China owns about 1/3 of all the rare earth minerals, 44 million tons. This is compared to Vietnam, 22 million tons, Russia, 10 million tons, Greenland, 2 million tons. And I don't see America in there.
Do you see where this is going? Do you see where this is going? Greenland, Russia, China. You see, I think Putin and Russia is going to throw China under the bus. And I think that they're going to just play neutral and be like, hey, we got to fix Russia. And I'm just saying the BRICS thing was basically a power play move. I'll get into that now because I made a post on my locals channel about this particular topic. And I think everybody's done with Xi Jinping. I think they're done. The people in China are done. Hong Kong's done with them. Taiwan's done with them. Taiwan is it's an ally. It's an unofficial colony in the United States. It's a big ally in the United States. I know it's a bold thing to say, but I'm big on China, and I've done a lot of research. I don't want to say I have contacts there because I don't want them getting unpersoned, but it is what it is. I think China's going to be, I think the war is over here, and I think the war is going to be over in Gaza because Trump wants to focus on China. That's what I think is going to happen. That's where World War III is. World War III is China. It's not Russia. It's not Gaza. It's not.
Well, they've tried. I think it's the axis of evil, the United States, the global American empire, versus the rest. So I think there's this polarization, and almost a new Cold War, but not just polarization. Global American empire,
proxy wars that are like Cold War in origin, but they're really just
So I disagree with your perspective on BRICS and China and Hong Kong, but you said, but I'm looking forward to listening to what you want to say.
No, I mean we'll see what happens. I just think that keep an eye on China. That's all. You guys know whenever I say keep an eye on something, what usually happens, Adam? When I say to keep an eye on something, what usually happens?
Or it usually blows up. Yeah.
Yeah. So keep an eye on China, guys. Just letting you know. You've heard it here first before anybody else. Just keep an eye on China. That's all I'm going to say. Taiwan and China. Just
say you know. That any point in the past 5,000 years, and it'll be very relevant. Keep an eye on China, guys. It's quite an important.
Keep an eye on China and Xi Jinping. That's all I'm going to say. But I just want to get to this one thing real quick because we're getting off the topic of the Ukrainian war. I'm not saying we're getting off, but I want to get this, then we can go to something else. But let me bring it up. So I wrote this article on my local channel. The link is in the if you're on Rumble, you can click the join button. Rumble 3 gets you just 3 months off your first month's subscription, makes it $1 for the first month on and Twitch and all the other platforms I'm on. We're on 6-7 platforms right now. It's in the subscription. But basically I wrote this February 20th, shortly after all this stuff came out 2 days ago. I think it's kind of funny and sad at the same time. Russia basically played Georgia again, and the Georgians fell for their trickery. And I use the word trickery loosely. It's business at the end of the day. It's just business. It has nothing to do with tricks it's the art of the deal, Putin just threw the Dream Party under the bus. I call it the Nightmare Party. It's the current party that's in power in Republic of Georgia. Russia used Georgia as a proxy for the trade war with the EU and the US. But Putin has agreed to rebuild trade ties with Trump's America while forcing the EU to comply or face sanctions from the most powerful country on the planet, the people of the United States of America. That's debatable. I'm sure Adam will debate me on that one. Now Georgia has no more U.S. aid money because Trump is cutting it off. The EU is sanctioning it because they passed the gay bill, the anti-NGO bill, and then there was a couple other things that they had passed. And Russia no longer needs Georgia for trade. I mean, I think they may still continue to trade with them, but they were a convenient ally. And this is business at the end of the day. Now that Russia can trade back with the EU, pretty much the Dream Party has destroyed any possibility of becoming an EU country, so they're not going to benefit from it. Basically 9D chess play by Putin. Bravo. That's all I wanted to say. And like I said, I'm pretty neutral in all of this. I'm not saying Putin's a bad guy. I'm not saying Trump's a bad guy. I'm not even saying the Dream Party are full of retards, which it might possibly be. But the reality is this is business at the end of the day, guys. That's all the Ukraine war was, is business. It's just unfortunately the NATO and EU and the United States got their asses kicked on that business deal, and that was a shitty investment. And Trump is pretty much like, we should have never done that. And I got to fix the problem now. I got to fix retards, mistakes, because lots of people wanted to profit off of this conflict, not necessarily on both sides, but pretty much just one-sided. Russia was like, what the fuck? And they're like, I had to defend my Russian-speaking people. I mean, we know that. We've covered that. For
Russian
years.
People.
Russian people.
They're not just Russian-speaking.
Ethnically Russian-speaking Russian people. So like, I mean, it was a stupid war. For fucking 10 years, 2014 or 2004, I think, right? How far back does it go?
It depends. I mean, you can you can bring it back to the 1950s, right? So
you could probably make it back to Tsar age if you wanted to. Yeah.
Like I say that the London has lost its second Crimean War, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of how far back it goes, the Great Gay in the 1800s. But I think that this conflict, if you had to put a date in it, I would say the Bucharest Summit or Bucharest Memorandum, 2008. So it was leaked by WikiLeaks. The Niet means Niet telegram by the then Russian ambassador of the United States of America, Burns, who became the CIA director under Biden. He said, do not invite Ukraine into NATO. It will lead to war. And then later that year, they invited NATO, and NATO invited Ukraine and Georgia into NATO as kind of hopeful aspirants. there was then the war with Georgia, and then the war with Ukraine, and then it escalated 2013, 2014 with the Euromaidan coup. There was a color revolution in Ukraine in 2004, I believe, but I think I would place 2008 as the start of this conflict.
Yeah, that sounds about right. But yeah, Georgia's tied in this as well.
It's called the Orange Revolution. It was 2004.
Orange Revolution. Yeah, and Georgia was the Rose Revolution. That's where they broke off from Russian influence and gained U.S. EU influence, and then basically under Saakashvili United Party, and then there was a 2008 conflict, the Georgian Ossetia War, in which Russia responded mercifully from the North Caucasus, and that ended in 3 days. 3 days. They were saying I made a mistake. I thought the Ukrainian war would end in like a month or something. I thought it was just going to end, but I made that mistake. I thought it was going to be a quick. And most analysts and most influencers believe the same thing. So we were all wrong. I was wrong on that. Sorry, guys. I was right on the way that they would come in and how they would handle it, but I knew they're going to come. They're going to go in quickly, which they did. But as far as it ended in 3 days. France had to come in and negotiate a peace deal with Medvedev, Russian bear in Russian, before Putin was, president. And it ended, took, I think, a week and a half, 2 weeks, something like that. And Gori was completely destroyed in Georgia, and the Georgia lost Ossetia, the autonomous zone, and then Abkhazia obviously was a 91 conflict. They would never get that ever again. I think that's part of Russian Federation now, permanently.
Has it been formally annexed, or is it just a Russian vassal autonomous zone within Georgia?
I think Ossetia and Abkhazia are officially Russian territories, but they're autonomous within Russia. So they were autonomous zones, part of Georgia, before the 91 conflict. And Ossetia, basically Georgia got Ossetia and Russia got Abkhazia, and Abkhazia stayed as an autonomous zone of Russia, and Ossetia was an autonomous zone of Georgia. And then in the 2008 conflict, basically Ossetia and Abkhazia were lost, and they're actually every citizen in Abkhazia and Ossetia are Russian citizens, but they're also recognized, I think, as autonomous zones or independent states, if you will, by Russian Federation.
It is the Bucharest Summit of 2008, and specifically they passed the NATO Action Plan membership for Georgia and Ukraine on the 4th of April. So I'm going to say, unless someone wants to comment or correct me, that the 4th of April 2008 seems to be the start of this conflict.
Sounds about right. That was Bush's energy war. That was when that peaked. He originally went into, that was the peak of the energy war. He started in Afghanistan and Iraq. Apparently Iraq had nothing to do with that incident that occurred. I don't want to say it because we're on YouTube, CensorTube, if you will. But yeah, that he was like, oh, there's targets in Iraq, and I kind of want to get that because my daddy didn't do it, so I'm going to do it for him. And then the Afghanistan conflict was the mineral rights. That's really what they wanted to do. And the fact is that individual they were searching for was not even in Afghanistan. He was in Pakistan while that happened. And who knows if he was even alive.
Great allies of the United States.
Yeah. They were an ally in the war on terror. Pakistan was. Yep. Yeah. It's a fucking clown show. So the reality is the whatever the pretense or whatever, the conflict and all this and the summit and everything, at the end of the day, as I keep saying to you guys, as an expert in this, and I went to very prestigious schools, and I've studied this for 20 something years, extensively, read all the books, have worked in academia, have met NATO people, have met ambassadors, have talked with people, and I'm just telling you, these are just energy wars. I worked in energy too for 15 years. So it's just energy wars. It's all over resources. That's it. Plain and simple. The Ukraine war is the same. Gaza war. And China, watch China. That's all I'm going to say. Keep an eye on China. Energy war is not over yet. We'll see. But anyway, what was the agenda? Did we have, I did send that to you, right? Let me double check. Because we were going to cover, I want to cover a couple other things unless you've got to go.
Nope.
Okay, let me see what I have here. Okay, so yeah, we talked about the Ukraine conflict. Zelensky Where the hell did I send it to you? I apologize, guys. We're live, so like we just want to make sure we're covering everything that we want to cover because it's been a while since we've been down here.
You wanted to cover Ukraine, maybe if you wanted to talk about
we caught
California.
Massive losses in Ukraine. We did. The economic decline, which we did. There were some FEMA failures. I don't know if it's necessarily we need to cover that, but let's tie in a little bit of California and the water shortages. Mostly this is just dealing with the incompetence of the Biden administration. I'd covered it in a previous podcast that I predicted it and it came true. I said, watch for this in California with the water crisis in Western United States. This would end up disastrously for the Western part of the United States, which had happened. We had the wildfires in Los Angeles, I think are still going on today. And I reported live from Florida during the hurricanes, both of them. And it was devastating. I applied for FEMA aid and they didn't give it to me. They told me to go fuck myself. So I left America and I came to Georgia because it's like I can't afford to live there with no possibility of jobs, and I can't fix my house and apartment because of the damage. And they said to go fuck myself, basically, the Biden administration. So that's why I voted for Trump. Yeah. Didn't want to, didn't really care, but I voted for him because I got fucked by the Biden administration. Hardcore. Yeah. Unemployment for 4 years under COVID. And I couldn't work overseas because they wanted me to get the jab in a lot of these countries I usually work in. And I basically just stayed unemployed for 4 years, living on savings and going. I finished my PhD basically. It's been horrible. Been horrible 4 years with the Ukraine conflict, with all the shit going on. And what do you think is going to be the future, like to wrap everything up into this economic situation? You're the economist, so do you think there's light at the end of the tunnel? What do you think future predictions for like Russia or the BRICS or even XRP or anything like in the United States? What do you think is going to happen? I said there's going to be a collapse in 2025, but said that for a while
now. Well, I think there's going to be market turmoil. I think we're in a massive bubble that ought to pop. Whether it does, whether it doesn't, I don't know. I wouldn't bet on it not popping. But also, while we're in the trend, who knows how long they can keep it going? I think the fundamentals are not reflected in the price, so there's a discrepancy there, and that tends to eventually correct. And when it corrects, I think there's so much inertia in the system that when it corrects, it's going to really correct, and there's going to be a massive problem. So I think it's important. Massive sell. I think once you have the sell-off, I think it's not going to be just 5%, 10%. It could be 30, 40%. Just
maybe 70%, like I'm predicting. But that'll be over a long period of time. That's not going to be immediate. That won't be overnight. That'll be
the bear market could last 2-3 years. Like it could be longer. I think big sell-off.
Because people are like, oh, I'll buy at the bottom, and they're like, I'm going to buy in. There's still losses,
and they keep having to sell because you have to live off the savings, and so all sorts of reasons to sell. But when will that occur? I think when the war is over. That's the trigger. You need to have a trigger for this massive macroeconomic shift.
Well, what happened after World War I? Between World War II, what happened shortly after World War I?
Well, they were printing money, right? 1913 Federal Reserve began, and then you had printing, you had financialization, you had stock markets. Then you had the drought and the Great Depression, and then the loans.
What do you think's happening right now in Western California, where like 1/3 of all, I think it's 1/4 of all the food and agriculture is grown in the United States. California, they're in drought right now. That's why wildfires. So what do you think's happening in Ukraine and Russia with all the soldiers that have died? They're not growing wheat. There's going to be food shortages, guys. That's coming. I'm just telling you. But go ahead. I'm so sorry to cut you off. I did an Alex Jones there. Sorry.
No. So what's my prediction? I think financially, there is a disconnect between the financial markets and reality, and that needs to correct this decade. How long can they keep it going? I don't know. Could it be this year? It could. Likelihood, I'm not sure, but it could happen by the end of this year. Wages, I think, depress. Hopefully,
well, the wages. I told you the wages here haven't gone up. The wages in the Middle East and GCC and Africa and different places that I've been communicating with, even in China, they've cut in half. They sliced them in half. So not only do they have to deal with hyperinflation, they cut the salaries in half in a lot of these countries, the developing economies, and even established like Saudi Arabia, like a very wealthy economy, oil-rich economy. They cut the salaries in half. They cut their benefits too. A lot of their welfare benefits. They usually get some type of UBI and the GCC. They cut a lot of those out. And now they have VAT tax. They have import duty tax now. They didn't have that before.
And of course, inflation comes from the production, creation of money. Government spending isn't going down, so they keep spending, which is printing, creating money. So inflation doesn't stop. Maybe we've been through some of it, but has it slowed down? I mean, it may have been slowing down in its ascent, but it's not stopped. It's not reversing. It's not coming over. So there's inflation, economic decline. The combination of those two is stagflation. If things get worse, especially with employment and wages, you can end up in a depression or Great Depression. Is there light at the end of the tunnel? Well, you can still benefit through this. I mean, was the economy terrible for everyone in 2009? Most people, but not everyone. Was the economy terrible? Like, were things so terrible for people in the 70s? Well, a lot of people suffered, but some people, like those working in oil, we're very rich. Yeah. So the politician class, they keep increasing their wealth by millions, tens of millions. How are you doing this on such a low salary? Like, there's wealth, there's money to go around. The world is certainly richer than it's ever been, maybe. But there's all these problems that need to come out, and it's important just to position yourselves not for good times, but for the probable bad times which are coming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Obviously, prepare for the worst, like I always say, and it is coming. I think so. I think it's best to have a game plan and learn to be kind of self-sufficient. Like, definitely grow a small garden. Learn how to do your own automotive work. Learn how to. I mean, this is just different stuff that I picked up over the years. Like, maybe even try to learn some agriculture, like farming, like maybe buy some land outside of a major metro area so you can grow your own crops, or at least share crop with somebody. I don't know how bad it's going to get, but I mean, I think there is going to be some food shortages. I don't think it's going to affect the Western economies as much. I think it's going to be more affected developing economies and like the third world. I think it's going to be horrible for the third world, I think. And you're already seeing it now.
There's a popular quote, there's never been a famine in a democracy. It's not true. But the idea is, being rich and wealthy, if there's food shortages, it's, there's going to be less food. It's going to be more expensive here, but there's still going to be food around because you can afford it. But where they can't afford it, that's where the famines really are more likely to occur.
That's where I think the housing bubble is going to pop because of the high prices. People aren't going to be able to buy. The housing's going to it's going to bottom. I think it's where it's going to be hurt the most, is the housing bubble, because we had food in 2008. Obama gave us Obama bucks, so they were given food stamps. I think, like I said, Trump's going to be the UBI president. There's going to be food stamps and welfare and all kinds of shit. But I mean, the thing is America can do that because everybody uses the US dollar as a reserve currency, just like the pound and the euro. So I don't think we're going to necessarily be as affected. I think it's going to be a lot of poverty. I don't think there's going to be starvation so much. But the EU could collapse. And an EU collapse is not necessarily going to be Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome collapse. I think it's going to be a collapse where you're going to have people just leaving, kind of like the Civil War of the United States, where states are just going to be like, I'm leaving. I predicted that at the beginning of the conflict too, 3 years ago. I said that eventually you're going to see EU countries say that I'm done. I went Russian oil. I'm done. I'm leaving. You saw that with Hungary. What were the countries that happened with? Was Hungary is one of them? What was the
Slovakia?
Other
ones?
There's a couple other ones, but I predicted that came true. And I think that's going to happen now. I think you're going to watch Germany, watch France. And those
Italexit, Dexit, I don't know, German exit.
Because Britain left, Brexit. Yeah, I think they're going to leave. And then once it leaves, it'll dissolve.
Britain has always been an island, right? It's not part of Europe. There is this European. It's a complete different. It's a complete different feeling being in Britain and being in anywhere.
Of course. It's like being in America, basically. Yeah, you're like, you don't even realize what's going on across the channel. Yeah, of course.
So and you talk about leaving. Like, I know in America there's a lot more mobility, whereas in Europe these are like ethno nations that have been here for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, many generations. So it's a lot. Like, I don't think people necessarily will be like a Croatian man will say, things are so terrible here, I'm going to leave. I think things are worse here, and to position themselves better, gardening is a good one. Not being in debt, working through that, savings.
The thing is in Europe,
tools.
It's a very agricultural. They're still able to grow crops, not like the Middle East. You know what I mean? They're still able to do agriculture. I think what's going to happen is the countries are going to leave as far as regulation, EU regulation. I think the EU is going to disintegrate as a law, as an entity. And then countries will start just producing their own currency and just say, we're done. Base. That's
I think it's a bold prediction, which I don't agree with, but it's a bold prediction. The other thing is, unfortunately,
it just takes one country. It just takes one country, and
this is how like we call it the Soviet Union of Europe, the Soviet European Union. So it could be a domino thing, and there is genuine anti-EU sentiment in France, in Germany, in Italy, in other countries, in Hungary, Poland. Even when they're like, Poland right now has an EU president, Tusk, but Hungary says, look, you're sanctioning us for not wanting to accept multiculturalism and the great replacement in Hungary. No one voted for this. No one wants this. This isn't a condition, but you're sanctioning us because we don't want millions of non-European migrants. So there's some, and this is all because it comes from the central authority, the fiat of Brussels, whom, as you say, the European Commission is unelected by the people. It's elected by other members of the European Parliament and whatnot. So it's all just instead of like an aristocracy of merit, you have a bureaucracy of incompetence. And that bureaucracy of incompetence is progressive, meaning it expands and expands and gets worse, like a progressive disease like Alzheimer's. It gets worse and worse and worse until it's the end. So maybe EU collapse. I know that unfortunately Bulgaria is going to join the euro. The currency has been pegged for as long as I've known it, but I think this year, even in a few months, I think they're going to transition over to the euro, which is unfortunate. But such it is. So my general perspective is the trend keeps going until it doesn't, which is why the collapse of Lebanon, of China, of the EU, I just don't buy onto these. I'm not saying they're invalid theories, nor that the sentiment, the analysis behind it is invalid. They're probably completely true. I believe in inertia, studying trends. So prepare for, like, we can see the writing on the wall, and so prepare for that, but also prepare for things to keep going, because most likely they do until they don't. And then if you're not prepared when it doesn't, when things change, that's really where you can be in a very caught with your pants down.
We got a question here, or comment. So, hey, Professor Red Pill, wonder you're focused on streaming, so I'll drop you mine. Here's my Discord. Okay, awesome. Thank you. She looks pretty cute. Interesting. So I don't know. I think well, like I said, we'll see. I think we're in a situation where EU is not looking good right now economically, and like I said, the fallout from this conflict is going to be seen. But you could see it revive because if Russia starts to send oil and gas back to, not necessarily oil, but just gas back to Europe, we could see production start up again. And I think that's what Trump wants to do, but he's sanctioning the European, he wants to sanction and tariff the European Union because they're not doing enough. They're kind of wanting the benefits without actually doing the work. You know what I mean? that's where I think it's going.
What he's said is the USA is stepping back from this conflict, and the European and especially the British said, "We'll take it. This is our war." It's like, okay, foolish, but enjoy. And it's because especially the elites are so ideological, and that's how this war began. It's not based in reality, but ideology, especially the Frankfurt School.
I mean, think about that though for a second. Though, do ideological wars are they ever successful in history?
One can argue the Reconquista of Spain and elements of the Crusade. I think the Crusades were pretty disastrous.
I mean, it went back and forth though. Like they would conquer, they would control, then they would lose it, and then they would, it was just going back and forth for many.
And then they say like, "Hey, we've come from France. We're in Constantinople. Let's just sack the city." It's like, no, you can't do this. This is a Christian city. Like, so they'd rape and pillage. So yeah, there's if there's a just war, like I do say that the Russian war, the Russian side here is a just war, whereas the other side is not. So I think a just war has a greater chance of succeeding. Ideological war, and we could talk about, for example, the 100-Year Wars of France. That was an ideological war. After 116 years, England had lost almost all their territory except for Calais, and they were in a worse situation than they started. And the English country had been pillaged through taxation so terribly that everyone suffered as a result, because these are ideological wars. So yeah, don't have a good track record.
Yeah. Anything else you want to add? We'll go ahead and close it out.
Sounds good.
All right, awesome. Yeah, like I said, just join us on our locals. Liberty Rising. Adam Maxwell's links in the description of. He should be in the description of all the different places we post. But come join us on Telegram and join locals. And yeah, donate if you can. And remember, like and subscribe and share with friends. Definitely.
Most importantly, subscribe, join in on the chats, and share with friends.
Definitely. Thanks, guys. I'll be posting more content. I'm on my locals channel. I'm going to go ahead and I've got a couple of podcasts I'm going to be doing on there for members only, and that's going to be coming soon. And like I said, we're on Telegram every day. We're on there every day. So if you come on Telegram, we're there. You can talk with us and correspond, and it's good times. Those links are in the description. But that's about it. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.